Today we're going to meet Brent, who spends 3, 4, 5 months a year traveling out of his Prius. He has a home base, but still he travels for 5 months a year out of his Prius. I know quite a few people who live or travel in a Prius. In fact, this was shot, I believe, at the 2016 RTR. It might have been the 15, I forget. And we had 4 people there who lived in their Prius. And so we had a Prius day where we had an open house, and they came and they showed and demonstrated their how they lived and their setups in their Prius. And we also had one Toyota hybrid Highlander. So we had 5 Toyotas there, and Brent was one in his Prius, and we just went down the line and I recorded them all. And this is Brent, so it kind of starts at the beginning. We just went from the last one to this one, and then he started. And I know a lot of you are out there thinking to yourself, you can't possibly live in a Prius. You can't travel for 5 or 6 or 7 months in a Prius. And yet, like I'm telling you, I know half a dozen people or more dozen people who are doing just that. You see, the nomadic life, and really all of life, is about this balance of mobility and freedom versus comfort. And the only question is, what is most important to you? If comfort is all important to you, and you must have comfort, then you're going to give up a lot of your mobility. Comfort means a house, it means a job, it means being tied down. And even if you travel as much as you can, you still got to pay for all that. You've got to have a job, and that really restricts your mobility. Whereas if you could do without most of the comforts and live in a Prius, as an example, or a van, then your mobility can drastically increase because you'll need to work much, much less. You will be able to travel and live so cheap that you can travel more and work less. And that's the whole goal of the nomadic life. Either have an income coming in so you don't work at all, or just to travel more and work less. Live more, work less, because they're antithetical too, aren't they? Working and living are not the same thing. And so with a Prius, you get a gigantic amount of mobility. Why do you get more mobility out of a Prius? Because you're getting 50 miles to the gallon. And you can just jump in the thing and go and drive 1,000 miles, 2,000 miles, 5,000 miles. And the cost of the fuel is not limiting you. How mobile and how free are you if you can't afford to go anywhere? And if you have all the comfort of a 40-foot Class A or a 40-foot fifth wheel, yes, you have a huge amount of mobility, and yes, you do live on wheels, but if you can't afford to drive it, and if you hate driving it through towns, and if you can only put it in an RV park, how free are you? You're only as free as much money as you have. And so unless you retired with a lot of money, that means you have to work a lot to pay for all that, and there goes all your freedom. There goes all your mobility. You can't drive around well in town. You can't find parking places in town. You can't go to boondocking spots. You're going to get terrible gas mileage. Can you afford to burn all that gas? So there's always this fight, this balance back and forth against mobility and comfort. And the Prius answers the question, which is more important to me, with mobility is more important to me, and I will live with a minimum amount of comfort. Enough, it's adequate, but minimum amount of comfort for the maximum mobility. You can zip through any city. You can park in any parking lot in a Prius. You can drive across the country for a few $100s. It's just ultimate mobility, ultimate freedom is in a Prius. Now you can't go off-road, so then you have with them very well. They're just really poor. Their little ground clearance makes it very hard, very limiting. And so there's a way, it is a limit. Then you're gonna have to say, okay, I've lost more mobility here than I am willing to. I have to make another compromise. For me, just for me, in my opinion, the single best compromise and balance, that fine balance. Yeah, I've only got so much comfort, but look at all the mobility I've got. I'm glad to give up the comfort for the mobility. The best balance is right here. It's cheap to buy. Most of us can afford to buy it and get into it. We don't have to work for 10 more years or 20 more years to buy a fifth wheel or a Class A or a huge Class C. I can afford that right now. Whatever you have, you probably can afford a van right now. A minivan. You can almost certainly afford a minivan. And you get decent gas mileage. You get a minivan, you get pretty decent gas mileage. You get decent comfort. You get decent off-road ability. It's balanced. It's this balance of, in every way, of comfort versus mobility. But I'm not getting 50 miles to the gallon, and I can't just jump in the van and drive across the country without thinking about how much it's going to cost me in gas. With the Prius, I could. So, Brent is going to show us how he's modified his Prius to give us maximum comfort, and of course he already gets maximum mobility with the 50 miles to the gallon. One more thing. The Prius are huge generators on wheels. Their engines are one of the most efficient generators ever made, and they have a huge battery bank, a drive power battery bank. And it uses its drive, it actually drives the wheels, and then the generator, actually the engine is the generator. The engine turns and drives the wheels as well. They work together, trading back and forth. And it also charges this huge battery bank. So this huge battery bank can be used by the owner, and Brent's going to talk to you about that, how he tapped into the battery bank. For example, it's hot, really hot. You're going to run a generator? Well, that limits your mobility. You got to carry it. You got to pay for the gas. You got to carry the gas. You've got to pay for tune-ups and repairs and on and on and on. So instead, he turns his engine on, and the generator runs off of this huge battery bank that runs the engine and drives the wheels. And the engine, when it starts to get low, but because it's so huge, it doesn't get low very often. When it starts to get low, then the engine kicks on automatically. He just leaves the key in a certain setting, and the engine kicks on and recharges the battery. But because it's such an incredibly efficient generator, it'll run 5 minutes to recharge that battery. So for the people I've talked to, you leave your AC on overnight and just let it run. You just set the amount you cold you want. You turn it on. It will run. The engine will kick on and run for 5 minutes every 20. Maybe it'll run 15 minutes a night. And they say that at 15 minutes a night overnight, they can't even tell a difference in the gas gauge. They can't tell any difference in their gas mileage. It's so minimal because it's this incredibly efficient engine. That's what you're buying, an incredibly efficient engine that is also a generator. The Toyota engineers did an amazing job with the Prius. The Prius is, every time you go, I'm going to challenge you this, you go look, do a Google search, 10 most reliable vehicles of all time. The Prius will be on every single one of those lists. It's an unbelievably reliable vehicle. That's going to be a lot of what you people say. Oh, the batteries are all going to die. They break down all the time. It's so complicated. No one could ever possibly keep one on the road. Always listed as one of the 10 most reliable vehicles ever. It's an incredible piece of equipment. So and that freedom of, I don't have to worry about it breaking down all the time, is also one of the things you really got to treasure about the thing. Okay, so that's enough. I'll let Brent speak for himself now. Let's watch the video, and Brent will tell us all about how to make the Prius as comfortable as it possibly can be. So let's watch the video.
My first year traveling was 3 years ago. I retired and I bought a Class B, and I live in Massachusetts. I drove out here. It costs over $1,000 in gas to get here, and then it's going to cost me over $1,000 to go home. And I started making decisions on my trip my first year about how much value there was of going there based upon how much it was going to cost me in fuel. Plus I started thinking about the environment. So when I got home, I sold my Class B immediately, and I went and found this Prius. It's used. It's 2011 and it was $16,000, but it only had 8,000 miles on it, so it was relatively new. So I have a background in engineering, so I took an approach that I wanted to have all the creature features that I had in my Class B in my Prius. So what did I need? I needed to be able to have my refrigerator, and this is an Engel. It's very expensive, but it does what I want it to do because it uses very electricity. I wanted to have fresh water, so I have a fresh water tank. I have a wastewater tank, and I have the power of a house battery separate from the Prius battery as well. Because I choose to stealth sometimes in cities, not too often, but if I have to do curbside parking, I can still keep my cooler running at night off the house battery, and I charge my house battery from the Prius system. I'll explain that a little bit afterwards. So my goal in doing this was I wanted to have the ability to do that. I wash up inside of mine, and I do everything I need to do. The only thing cooking I can do, I don't have open flame either. And like Sue Ann said, I have a hot pot, and I plug it into my 12 volts, and I boil water. I make my own tea in the coffee press, and I have instant oatmeal, things like that. So if you come over here, I can then show you the detail behind this. I removed the back seats completely and designed articulating plywood to provide a seat area, because this is something Sue Ann had posted that was very important to her, is having a place to sit separate from where your bed is. And it's also great because you can sit on the edge of the bed and take your shoes off without getting everything dirty. So I sit here, I got my little tray, and of course the seat moves forward further, and I wet shave here. The funnel is not my pee funnel, it is my funnel for wastewater. Okay, so I use that to, my shaving water or my wash water, I just pour it down there. You'll see how I do the hot water. Fire extinguisher, I have a CO smoke detector on the ceiling, and my 2-gallon bucket that serves the same purpose that Suzanne does. And so this plywood system here also folds down if I wanted to make this a full bed. Never had the need for it, so I probably wouldn't do it again. But one of the things I do benefit from having that design is that it allows me to have a table, because of the way I designed it. Inadvertently, I came up with a table, which I have a support that slides up and does that. So the other side is built the same way. It's the 60% side of my bed. So the storage underneath the other side is where I keep all the things on top, and when we get around there, I'll show you what those are. This side here is the Prius 12-volt battery is directly underneath. So the 12-volt battery is right below here. So the distance to my connection is very short. And so when I plug my hot pot in here, I am drawing electricity out of a connection I made directly out of very high cables so that I wouldn't have much loss in voltage or loss in heat into the wires. I have a 400-watt pure sine wave inverter. Here I just demonstrating I'm charging a lithium battery pack for my Bluetooth speaker that I like to listen to when I'm around. And so I have a control center over here. There's like a house switch here, and that house switch allows me to turn the power on and off to the 12-volt battery as I choose from inside. Over here is a house battery on this side, and I monitor that again with a digital meter built in. I have designed these inserts for my rear windows, and these become my screens. They pop in, and so I also have a collapsible table, but this year I designed a solution that works off of basically the Prius itself, because I designed this table that works off of a sprung door. I mean, the door is quite ways open, so there's a lot of pressure against it to keep it from moving. And then I used the design of it and made a pin so it can't slide up and fall out on me. And this is where I've set up to, and I can kind of block the wind. And one of the problems I had last year when I was in Ehrenberg, being open out there, it's finding a place to cook. So I was cooking between the two doors. Well, now I can move the car around and I can actually, work off this table. It gives you a nice work surface. This is my cooking equipment. This is like food and utensils, and there's my pots. I could go smaller, but I enjoy having a single burner. This is actually a dual fuel, like Sue-Ann is. I run butane normally. Another design change this year was this plastic storage unit right here. This is where I keep all my clothing. It's plastic wood. I had a leftover project at my house, so I made this plastic wood, and my clothing fits logically in cubby holes. The other thing is underneath, it's attached to my freshwater tank. That's a funnel, but that's the fill right there. 6 gallons of water, sit nice and low on the floor. You stick this in and you squeeze the pump and you get your water out of your tank. So that's basically my design built around the Prius.